to the TEA Texas Accelerated Instruction Requirements webinar. We are excited to have you here. This webinar may be just a review for some of you that have already been part of the HB 1416 world, or it may be new for those that are new to your role as supporting accelerated instruction. So either way, we hope that you find some of the information that we share with you useful today. I'd like to begin this session with some introductions. I'll start by introducing myself. My name is Alicia Garcia, and I am the Texas Tutoring and Content Specialist, and I am joined by our team's director, and he will introduce himself.
Hello, thank you for joining us. I'm Colby Self, Director of Texas Tutoring Supports, and again, just echo what Alicia mentioned today. Some of you have been in the space for a while, and we're glad you're joining us. Hopefully you'll take away something new, but if not, it'll be a great review. And for those of you new to the space, definitely hope to show you some great resources you can mark. And feel free to ask questions as we go along as well. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. So during today's session, we will go over the HB 1416 requirements and the different pathways that school systems can choose to fulfill these requirements. We will also take a look at some of the scheduling options that school systems have in implementing supplemental or accelerated instruction, and we'll also go over PEIMS reporting. If you have any questions, please drop them in the Q&A box. This allows us to capture your questions if we run out of time to answer your questions, and also it helps us identify which topics we need to add to our HB 1416 FAQ. A recording of this webinar and a copy of the slide deck will be available on the Accelerated Instruction webpage in a couple of days. So just know that you will have access to all this information. And if you have any colleagues that did not have time to join us because they were busy, that's okay. We will post this recording. So let's start today by talking about the HB 1416 requirements. Texas law requires that students who do not approach grade level or higher receive accelerated instruction. School systems can fulfill this requirement in two different ways. One, they can assign a student a TIA designated teacher in the applicable subject area. The teacher of record for the relevant subject area must hold the TIA designation at the start of the school year. If utilizing a TIA designated teacher is not an option, school systems can choose to provide students with supplemental instruction. This instruction must target applicable grade level and subject area texts. This instruction must be for no less than 15 or 30 hours, depending on student performance. It can be provided during the summer or it can be provided during the school year. And if it is provided during the school year, then these sessions must take place at least once per week. Supplemental instruction is limited to 2 subject areas per school year, prioritizing math and reading. These sessions must be provided in a group of no more than 4 students, unless school systems secure authorization from parents or guardians of each student in a larger group, or if a school system is using a product that is on the ratio waiver list. These sessions must be designed to assist students in achieving satisfactory performance in the applicable grade level and subject area, and must include instructional materials that were designed for supplemental instruction. This instruction must be provided by a person who is trained on utilizing these materials effectively, and, if possible, provided by the same person for the entirety of the student's accelerated instruction. Now we're going to discuss some possible pathways for fulfilling HB 1416. Like I mentioned before, a school system can assign a student a TIA designated teacher for the applicable subject area. The teacher of record for the relevant subject area must hold a TIA designation at the start of the school year. If the teacher of record for the relevant subject area is not yet a TIA designated teacher at the time of the student's assignment, then supplemental instruction is needed. Supplemental instruction must be tutor-led in a 4-to-1 student-to-tutor setting, unless parents or guardians authorize larger groups, or if a school system is utilizing a product that is on their HB 1416 ratio waiver list. Students who are in the high does not meet category must receive 15 hours of supplemental instruction. Students whose STAR score falls in the low does not meet category, or if the student has a consecutive school year failure, or if a student failed a grade 3 math or reading STAR administration, these students must receive 30 hours of supplemental instruction. If a student has a consecutive school year failure in the same subject area, then the student must have an accelerated education plan. TEA, in collaboration with Region 17, created a flow chart that school systems could use to help identify which students require accelerated instruction and the amount of hours the students need, and whether or not a student needs an accelerated education plan. And so Dr. Self will kindly drop the link to this flow chart in the chat so that you can utilize if you haven't done so already. Please note that this flow chart is also applicable to end of course exams. Now we're going to take a closer look at the HB 1416 ratio waiver list. Approved products on the ratio waiver list use an automated, computerized, or other augmented method for providing accelerated instruction, thus waiving the requirement of having an in-person or virtual tutor present in a 4-to-1 student-to-tutor ratio during supplemental instruction. School systems can still use other products. School systems may use any curricular tool they choose to support accelerated instruction, but only products approved through this list qualify for the waiver of the 4-to-1 student-to-tutor ratio. So again, school systems can still use other products. However, if a school system is using a product that is not included on the ratio waiver list, tutor-led instruction is still required during tutoring sessions in a 4-to-1 student-to-tutor ratio. Applicable students must meet the minimum product usage requirements for the approved product. A school district not meeting usage requirements with the product or with the applicable product will be required to revert to the 4-to-1 ratio for supplemental instruction. So I'm going to take a pause and see, Colby, Dr. Self, do we have any questions that I may need to answer in the chat? It looks like we have quite a bit, so.
Yes, we do. Many of them are pertaining to EOC, which I know you're going to talk a little bit about later when we get to FAQ. Some general questions are, how do we get trained to tutor? Do you want to talk about that briefly? Just in general, how do people qualify to be a tutor or get trained to tutor?
Correct. Okay, so we want to clarify that you do not have to have a certified teacher to provide tutoring. A tutor can be a paraprofessional, a volunteer, a community member, a substitute teacher who is trained on the materials. So most supplemental products do provide training on how to implement the product as part of your accelerated instruction. So it really depends on what you select to use and what services that product offers. So the best way to get informed is to reach out to the company from whom you purchase these supplemental products, because many of these companies do provide training as part of their purchasing price. So again, you do not have to have a certified teacher. You just need someone who knows how to implement the use of these products effectively.
This is regarding the AEP, which you were mentioning. If a student failed English 1 star in spring of 2023 and was absent for the English 2 star in spring of 2024, do they require an AEP?
Yes, they do, because an absence is considered a failure. And so if they failed in 9th grade, when they took English 1 and they were absent for English 2, that is considered a consecutive school year failure. So the student does require an accelerated education plan.
And will additional products be added to the ratio waiver list in the future?
So we are going to review products in the upcoming week, where sometime this fall we will open up the application submission window so that vendors who are interested can apply. So depending on how the review goes, we may have additional products for reading and math, and we will announce those in the spring. But yes, we have had different vendors reach out to us, and we have provided them with some information, except the application window has not opened yet. But once it does, we will reach out to them, let them know, and then they're more than welcome to apply.
Thank you, Alicia. I'll let you continue. There are some specific EOC questions you may get to, in the FAQ, but we should have time to address those a little bit later.
All right.
Just remind participants today, if you would put your questions in the Q&A. I do see some questions popping up in the chat, but we need them put in the Q&A if you want them answered here. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll continue. This chart gives you the list of the HB 1416 ratio waiver list products that were approved for the 24-25 school year. You do have the grade level that are the grade bands that the product itself covers, but then in parentheses, you have the grade levels that are applicable to HB 1416. So we do have two math products. We have IXL, which covers grades 4 through 11. So yes, this does include Algebra 1. And we have ST Math, which covers grades 4 through 8. We have three reading products. We have Amira Learning, distributed by Amira or HMH, which covers grades 4 through 6. And we have HMH Read 180 Flex, which covers grades 4 through 11. And we have IXL Language Arts, which covers grades 4 through 11. So just know that these are the only products that have been approved. If the product is not listed on this chart, then you cannot use it without a tutor or without teacher-led instruction. So just know that. And then we also have at the end, we have the minimum usage requirements. So in other words, students must use this product for at least 30 minutes twice a week, or 15 minutes 4 times a week, or 20 minutes 4 times a week, depending on the product that the student is using or that the school systems can select or have selected. So just remember that to benefit from the waived ratio requirement, applicable students must meet minimum usage product requirements for the approved product. If a school district fails to meet these usage requirements, it will be required to revert to the 4-to-1 student to tutor ratio for supplemental instruction. So again, the minimum usage requirements, 1, ensures that your student completes the required 15 to 30 hours before the next spring STAR administration, and also ensures that the student is using the product enough to experience success. How to use products on the ratio waiver list. So this slide is going to provide some clarifications based on some of the questions we've been receiving. School systems are required to notify parents or guardians that they will be using a product that is on the ratio waiver list to provide the required accelerated instruction. However, a signed parent permission form is not required. So school systems have to notify parents that they will be using a product that is on the ratio waiver list, but a signed parent permission form is not required. To benefit from the waived ratio requirement, applicable students must meet the minimum product usage requirements for the applicable product. School systems must also ensure that the required hours of supplemental instruction are completed prior to the subsequent STAR administration. So for EOCs, and this is something I want to clarify, for EOCs, the deadline to complete accelerated instruction is the next regularly scheduled EOC, which is normally administered in the spring. While accelerated instruction must begin during the school year following the failed EOC, it does not need to be completed for a summer EOC or a fall EOC administration that's given prior to the spring administration. So again, the deadline to complete accelerated instruction requirements is the spring EOC, which is the normally scheduled regular EOC. School systems must also assume responsibility for contracting and funding the selected vendors listed on the ratio waiver list. So again, TEA is not responsible for contracting or funding products that are on the ratio waiver list. This is the responsibility of school systems. Now that most school districts have started the school year and they've completed the first month, we have received quite a bit of questions through our email. And so these are the top FAQs that we've decided we need to discuss during this webinar. The first question is, if a 9th grade student failed his or her 8th grade reading or STAR math, should he or she receive accelerated instruction in the 8th grade reading or math curriculum? The answer is no. Accelerated instruction should support the student's grade level content area. There may be instances during tutoring sessions where addressing previous grade level skills is necessary, and that is okay if these foundational skills directly support and align with the current learning objectives in the classroom. Another example is if we have a student who fails grade 3 reading, that student's accelerated instruction should support grade 4 reading because that is their current grade area or current grade level. If a student fails grade 8 science, then accelerated instruction should focus on grade 9 biology or grade 9 IPC, depending on the student's current science enrollment. So again, we are providing students with accelerated instruction or with acceleration and not remediation. So accelerated instruction should support the student's current grade level and subject area. Another question we've been receiving is, if an art committee decides that a student will participate in STAR Alt 2 in the upcoming administration, or if the art committee waives EOC requirements and accepts a student's STAR score, does that student have to complete accelerated instruction? The answer is yes. Students receiving special education services must receive accelerated instruction if they participated in the previous spring STAR administration, even if the art committee waives future STAR participation or decides that the student will participate in STAR Alt 2 in the next administration. Students receiving special education services still benefit from accelerated instruction. This instruction should be tailored to focus on the student's current course in the relevant subject area. So in other words, you're not providing STAR tutoring or STAR intervention. You're focusing on the student's current course in the relevant subject area. So I'll take a moment and ask Dr. Self, do we have any questions that pertain to our FAQs?
Yes, Alicia. There's a few more questions I wanted to surface coming about just general classes. We offer a reading class to all of our 6th graders in addition to RLA. Can this course meet the House Bill 1416 requirements for those students who failed 5th grade reading STAR? So looks like they're setting up a general class they would put all students in to try to meet the 1416 requirements.
So that would depend because you still have to meet the student to tutor ratio. And so are you meeting the ratio? So I hate to say a blank yes or a blank no because there are several other requirements that HB 1416 does have. And so that includes the student to tutor ratio. Are you using a product on the ratio waiver list? Are students having to give up an elective that other students in their grade level do have? So that just depends. This could be a question that I would recommend also sending to us on our help desk so that I can provide a more personalized response.
Definitely. I'll go ahead and drop that in the chat. There's quite a few specific questions that looks like we may need some more specifics to. So some of the broader ones we'll try to answer during this time. If a student was unsuccessful in the EOC in spring administration and passes the assessment in the summer submission, is there any documentation for House Bill 1416? I know we're going to talk a little bit about this coming up, but do you want to address that just in general terms? Documentation is always important. We want to be sure we're documenting that. Do you want to speak to that?
Sure, and I am covering this in our next slide or whenever we talk about PEIMS. So I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but I can answer that already. So on PEIMS, you will still report that the student was required to receive accelerated instruction for the applicable subject. And so you will report the subject, the amount of hours that are required. The student probably is not going to complete the hours prior to that summer administration because it's just not possible with the time frame, and that's okay. For the difference in hours, you will select the student did not complete hours prior to the next administration, and the student's passing star score is your documentation if TEA were to have any questions. So you're not going to get in trouble because we understand that there's a very short window between when the scores are released and between the summer EOC. So we understand that. And so the student's passing score is the documentation you will have. So again, yes, you will report it through PEIMS. You will select that the hours are not completed prior to the next administration for the reason the difference in hours. But the student's passing score is the documentation.
So one more question I'll answer. We're asked about recommending a specific product. And I just want to be clear, this has been a source of confusion as of this week. You're not required as an LEA to use a specific product listed on the ratio waiver list or any other list provided by TEA. You have the authority as a local education agency to use a product. The criteria set forth in the statute is a product designed to serve as a supplemental product and cover the TEKS needed for that student. So we've had some districts contact us and say, we must use products on the ratio waiver list, correct? That's not the case. You can use existing products you already have. It says on the webpage, you may continue to use or use other products. You just have to use them in that 4-to-1 ratio or obtain parent waivers if they're not part of that ratio waiver list. They're not listed on that as well. Do you have anything to add to that, Alicia? I know that's a question that I see come up quite a bit through emails and through the help desk. I just wanted to reiterate that point there.
Right, you're welcome to use, like I've had specific questions regarding other software, other online programs, and you can, but just remember that you have, in addition to having to abide by the 4-to-1 student to tutor ratio, you also have to have direct instruction led by a tutor. The tutor can use the online program as a resource as part of his or her direct instruction, but that the software alone cannot stand alone unless it's on the ratio waiver list. There were a lot of parameters or a lot of criteria that we set for these vendors to meet in order to ensure that students are still getting the support they need without having a live in-person or virtual tutor present during their sessions. And so that's why it's important that before a school system decides, oh, we want to use this program, give us an opportunity to ensure that the program does what it says it's doing. So that's why the ratio waiver list is something that you have to select from because we've already checked for that.
We have one more question about EMRA 2024 HQIM materials. So some of the approval of those materials are core content or core subjects. The supplemental math product is, my understanding, the rubric's going to be finalized for November and possibly a summer review, and potential math supplemental products would be approved a year from this November. Not all those products would qualify for the ratio waiver list. As you know, the ratio waiver list are products that can stand alone for student independence and can perform better than an in-person tutor or virtually provided tutor. But that is going to be a gateway that math supplemental products will eventually have to reach before they can be considered for ratio waiver list consideration. So we're not there yet. I think Mindy had that question. We're not quite there yet, but that is ultimately going to be a prerequisite we're looking at for future ratio waiver list approval. Not currently, but in the future, we are discussing that and sharing that with vendors as well. So it's not a default approval for everything that makes it through there to be on the ratio waiver list, because there are additional criteria that have to be met to qualify for that. Well, Alicia, there's several other questions, but I think you're going to answer those on some of the coming slides. So we'll let you go through those.
All right. Thank you for all your questions, though. Let's continue. So I'm going to talk about some of the scheduling options that you may have so that you can meet accelerated instruction requirements. One of the options is to provide the supplemental instruction during the school day or the accelerated instruction during the school day. And you have a couple of options. One, you can look at your master schedule and embed a period or some time within the master schedule to provide intervention for those that need the accelerated instruction or even enrichment for the other students so that everyone is getting something. It's like what you would call a what I need time. And so students needing intervention can receive it during this time. Students who need enrichment or that don't need intervention, and they can go on and receive enrichment. And so that's one option you have. If embedding the accelerated instruction during the school day is not an option, you could also use your TIA designated teachers. School systems are starting to become more intentional on ensuring that students who are requiring accelerated instruction are assigned a TIA designated teacher when one is available for that specific subject area. School systems could also provide supplemental instruction before or after school. We also have the option of providing this instruction during Saturday school. We have a lot of school systems that utilize summer school as a way to provide the accelerated instruction. And we also have school systems that provide this instruction during intersession. Dr. Self will provide the link in the chat that gives you some scheduling exemplars that you could look at that you may be able to implement. School systems must provide transportation to students living outside the 2-mile radius if attendance to tutoring sessions outside of regular school hours is mandatory. So again, you can still implement or you can still abide by the 2-mile radius, but if you are requiring students, if you're making it mandatory for them to attend outside of regular school hours, then you must provide them transportation if they live outside the 2-mile radius. And we understand that, it's difficult sometimes to get students to participate in accelerated instruction when it's provided outside of school hours. And so there are ways that you could provide incentives. One is to provide transportation to all students. Another is to provide incentives for students with high attendance. These incentives do not have to be expensive. These are ideas that we stole from other school systems that are doing this. And one shared with us that they have lunch with the principal. And so you can designate a day where students with high attendance to your after school tutoring sessions can have lunch with the principal. It could be on a Friday or a day where a principal would have time to sit and have lunch with these students. You could also provide students with inexpensive snacks if they attend. Some kids just thrive on having crackers before going home. And lastly, you can include enrichment activities as part of your after school or Saturday Saturday school program. And so when tutoring focuses on acceleration rather than remediation, and students begin to view these sessions as a support system to their current academic efforts, rather than viewing these sessions as punishment for falling behind their peers. But more importantly, when tutoring sessions align with classroom objectives, then students view them as a natural extension of what's happening in the classroom and as a natural extension of their classroom learning. So again, it's about moving away from making it seem like remediation and more about acceleration. And so that students feel like, okay, this is what I'm doing now. It's not because I'm dumb, but it's because I'm trying to be successful in what I'm currently doing in the classroom. So again, it's about changing the perspective that a student has when he or she attends these tutoring sessions. Now we're going to go into PEIMS reporting, which is going to be implemented this school year. So school systems are required to complete or to report accelerated instruction through their PEIMS summer submission process. So TA is going to collect different data elements. So school systems will report what subject a student is required to receive accelerated instruction, the mode of participation, how many hours the student is assigned, how many hours the student has completed, and the difference in hours. And so again, Dr. Self is going to drop in the chat the TSDS table for you to look at. But again, these are the only components. And so you're going to report the total number of hours that a student has completed, just the total, one time. If you are receiving a student from another school district, then you're going to report the hours that the student received at their previous school district and yours. So you're going to, again, report the total number of hours completed. Now I'd like to provide clarification for EOCs. So for PEIMS reporting, school systems will report when a student is assigned accelerated instruction. So if a student fails a test in the spring, retests in the summer, and passes, the school should report the total number of accelerated instruction hours assigned and the number of hours completed. Again, we know that there's a short window between the time that the scores are released and the time that the EOC is administered in the summer. And so we know that chances are that the student is not going to complete the assigned hours. When school systems submit the difference or provide a reason for the difference in hours, the reason will be that the hours were not completed before the next test administration. And that is okay. The student's passing score from the summer serves as sufficient documentation if questioned by TEA regarding the reason for incomplete hours. So again, we know that this may be the case for many students, and so we understand that. And so if we have any questions, we know that that passing score will be your documentation. We do have an upcoming webinar that will be taking place Wednesday, October 2nd from 2 to 3 p.m. This webinar will focus on high impact tutoring supports. We're wanting to share with you the various supports available for high impact tutoring, and this will include the many tools you can use to assist you with the development and sustainability of a program. And so again, Dr. Self will drop the link to the webinar registration in the chat. We also have several resources that you can find helpful. And so I'm going to navigate to our webpage, which is where we have most of these resources. This is our accelerated instruction webpage. In this webpage, we do have a recording of the past webinars we had, and we will also post the webinar deck for this webinar and the recording for this webinar, and then the one for next week. We also go over the different accelerated instruction requirements. We provide some guidance as well. We have some templates, including the flow chart that we shared with you, the exemplar of an AEP, both in English and Spanish, and also a parent notification letter for students that require to receive accelerated instruction. We also have a link to our FAQ. Many times when we receive questions, these questions, in fact, have been answered in our FAQ. So many times we tell the person who emailed us, we give them the answer, but we also say the FAQ also provided guidance. So many times, if you're in a hurry and you're not sure you'll have time to wait on our response, you can click on the FAQ and that'll give you some guidance and also some links. Like, for example, we receive a lot of questions regarding the high does not meet, low does not meet table. So we have the link for that specific web page that houses the low does not meet, high does not meet categories. We also have a link to our HB 1416 ratio waiver list listed here. And that will take us back to our slide deck. And that is all I have. So Kobe, we could take some time to answer some questions.
Sure. Some EOC questions regarding the PEIMS coding. If a student does not meet standard on an EOC in April, but they meet the standard on the same assessment in the summer, how are they coded for the fall PEIMS 24-25 school year submission?
So you will still code them as participating in accelerated instruction, right? And then you will report the hours that they were supposed to receive. So if student was high does not meet, it's 15 hours, low does not meet, it would be 30 hours. And then when you get to explaining the difference in hours, you will select hours were not completed prior to the STAR administration, knowing that the student's passing score is your documentation for the student not completing the hours.
This question, next question pertains to the special education services. If a student's receiving special education services, does the ARD committee have rights to adjust or modify accelerated instruction time due to students' identified needs?
So the statute does not, HB 1416 does not mention the ARD committee having that authority, but it does grant that authority to the parent. The parent is part of the committee, so the parent can submit a written request to modify or remove accelerated instruction requirements.
So my understanding from what you're saying, it's not the ARD committee as the ARD committee involving the parents, but the ARD committee without the parents are not solely able to just modify it. It's because House Bill 1416 requirements are a general education process is
Correct.
okay. Here's a question. What about if a student was in a lower grade level, such as second grade, so they did not test for STAR, but were placed this year in fourth grade? I don't understand that question, so we'll. Do they need House Bill hours even though they never had to take the third grade STAR? So they may have been placed in a higher grade, so they don't have a prior test. They may have accelerated and skipped a grade. It looks like they may have skipped third grade, so they don't have a third grade test. Are they required to have hours with that? We may have to look into that. I don't think we've come across that before.
That's the first time, so
Yeah.
we'll have to look into that and we can provide a response.
Natalie, if you want to fill out a help desk ticket, that's something we could look into. We haven't ran into that situation before. But if you want to send that to our help desk, we'll be happy to find an answer for you on that. That's a new one for me today. So some specific about products. If a student requires, so I think this is pertaining to ratio waiver list. And if a student requires both math and reading tutorials, does IXL usage requirements mean a student would need a total of 2 hours of tutorials per week? And I think it's based on the chart you showed with the ratio waiver list, the usage minutes to be able to hit the hour requirement before the next test. Do you just want to talk a little bit about those minute requirements versus the usage in that respect?
Okay, I'm going to go back to that specific chart. Okay, Kobe, will you repeat the question again?
So if a student requires both math and reading, because remember, House Bill 1416 says you're only requiring students to have to meet for 2 subjects, prioritizing math and reading. So
correct.
It appears the student needs both math and reading, and they're looking at using IXL to meet it. And where the minimum usage requirements are 30 minutes 2 times per week. So it would be an hour for math and an hour for reading.
Correct.
Is that what the student would be required, or the targets for usage for the student per week?
Correct. That is correct. And so I would recommend alternating, right? Like one day math, one day reading. But yes, it's 1 hour for math and 1 hour for reading. So if you're totaling it, it's 2 hours total.
And these usage requirements may vary from other programmatic things you may see. Like if you're participating in Math Supplemental Curriculum, which has some of these similar products, the reason you may have 30 minutes twice per week is because if you look at the ratio waiver list language, the hours need to be completed before the next test. And if you do the math and with holidays and things like that, there needs to be an aggressive approach to be sure that those hours are completed. If a student has 30 hours required and they're only doing 30 30 minutes a week, you can see it could be a challenge to accomplish that before the next exam. So that's why the usage requirements are fairly aggressive. There are holidays, there are sometimes where things happen, weather events, things that occur that you may not hit those targets per week. So that's why those usage targets were set up with these particular providers for that.
Correct. And I see some people are starting to drop off slowly, so I'm going to go ahead and share our exit ticket. So of course, we always appreciate feedback. How can we improve? What is it that you would like for us to cover next time? So we would kindly ask that you please fill out this exit ticket and let us know if you found this useful. And even if it's just a suggestion on some other resources you would like for us to look into creating. And so we'll continue here and answering questions, but I wanted to give you an opportunity to give us feedback. And so again, you could use your phone or we'll drop the link in the chat as well.
Yeah, let me grab that link and I'll drop that in the chat here for everybody. It's a little bit easier sometimes in your phone. If I can grab that here. Question about PEIMS reporting while I'm doing that. For PEIMS reporting, are only the subject and hours supposed to be reported for the student if the student was placed in a student AEP or all accelerated instruction hours? So there's a question about, is it only if there's an AEP assigned, or is it ultimately going to be all hours there?
It is for all students receiving accelerated instruction. And so I know that the word plan was in the rule, in the TWEDS rule, but that has been removed. And so it has clarified that all students receiving accelerated instruction will be reported through PEIMS. So even students who do not require an AEP will still have to be included in your PEIMS submission.
This is another thing. I think this is a question we had recently. Similar to EOC, if a student is working on their hours and they pass the December EOC retest before they complete their hours, do they need to continue?
No. Once a student passes a STAR administration, then HB 1416 requirements cease. Now, when you do report through PEIMS, again, the difference in hours, because you're going to report the hours assigned and then the hours completed. If there is a difference, that is okay. You can just select hours were not completed prior to the next administration for EOC, and then the student's passing score will be your documentation.
Lots of similar questions about the EOC, that if the student does pass a subsequent EOC of the same subject, the same test, that the hours do stop. They're not required to continue. And I think you mentioned that we would see that if the hours were not met, but the student did pass the test, that's why the hours were not completed. I think that was a level of concern that was raised before as well. When will the recording of this from this session be posted?
We would try our best to have it up there by Friday, but sometimes it may be Monday. So we're trying our best. Sometimes it's out of our hands.
Lots of questions about the ratio waiver list. Currently, we only have math and reading products. They were asking about social studies and other products available. I've answered some of those, but do you want to talk a little bit about the potential? We have to have products that apply that are approved, but if you want to speak to that as well.
Sure. So vendors are welcome to fill out an application for all applicable subject areas. And so, but there is a high bar. We have a high standard that products must meet. And so once we have a product that meets the criteria, then they are included. And so, yes, we would love to have products that cover math and that cover social studies. I'm sorry, that cover science and social studies. And so but they do have a criteria that has to be met because we are removing the live in-person or virtual tutor, and we're also removing the 4-to-1 ratio requirement. And so a product has to prove that it is just as effective as having a tutor present So as soon as we review a product that meets that requirement, we will add that to our ratio waiver list.
Do the ratio waiver list products have reporting capabilities that document the hours on the platform?
I want to say some do, and I want to say most of them do, in fact. You would just have to gather the report from the product.
This question's come up in several variations. We probably need to speak to this. If a student's placed in the applicable TIA designated teacher, they're not also required to receive hours too. Being placed in the TIA designated teacher is one of the two options, correct? They're not getting hours as well. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So a student who is with the TIA designated teacher for at least one semester meets requirements. So when you report that through PEIMS, when you say a student participated for reading, it'll ask how, the participation mode, and that's one of your choices. You will select TIA designated teacher for the applicable subject, and then that's it. You will not be asked any other questions regarding hours or anything else. Once you select TIA designated teacher, then you've already reported what you had to report because you're not required to track the hours since accelerated instruction is taking place during classroom instruction.
So this is a different question we haven't had. If they want to use time with a ratio waiver list product, but they also want to use time where they may be in a tutoring group with a teacher or other tutor, they can mix and match the time, correct? It's not an all or none proposition, correct?
Correct. And so I'd like to clarify too that the ratio teacher involvement is key in making the use of a ratio waiver list product successful, right? And so we do definitely still need the involvement of the teacher, for the progress monitoring, to ensure that the lessons are still aligned with what's happening in the classroom, to ensure that a student is doing what he or she should be doing as opposed to just meeting hours. Like the purpose of the ratio waiver list is not to have a student sit in a computer program and just knock out hours. It should be intentional. Teachers should be monitoring. And it's just to ensure that, students are in fact engaged with the program. And so if your report shows that a student was trying to complete a lesson and it took 3 hours, well, that should be a red flag, right? What was the student doing? And so anyway, we definitely still need the teacher involvement. That's going to be key in having success with implementing a product from the ratio waiver list. And so yes, mixing it up, having group instruction, and then having students get on the computer and work on a product that's on the ratio waiver list, that can definitely work.
Something I think that
Sherry.
staff or staff that may be new to their role comes across. I think it comes up this time of year. So students that either did not test for whatever reason, and parents are now saying, I want to opt my student out of any type of accelerated instruction. Can you talk a little bit about that process and what is required in order for that waiver to be accepted?
Correct. So it all depends on the score and the code. So students who are coded 00 with an S code, that means that the students showed up but did not test, refused to test. Those that are 00 with an S code can have the parent, are required, first of all, they're required to receive 30 hours of supplemental instruction because that falls in the low does not meet category. A student does not have to complete a beginning of year assessment in order for the parent to opt them out. So a student's parent can opt them out without having a beginning of year assessment if the student has a 00 score with the S code. That means that the student showed up, but just did not participate, did not answer any questions. If a student was absent, that means the student has a 00 score with an A code, or if a student has an O code for other and has a 00 code, then that student must complete a beginning of year assessment before a parent can request to opt out or modify accelerated instruction requirements. Now, what the student scores on the beginning of year assessment, that does not matter. They just have to complete one. Again, If a student has a 0-0 score with an A code or an O code, they must complete a beginning of year assessment before a parent can request to opt out or modify accelerated instruction requirements.
Another question that seems to be a common theme is students come to us that weren't in the state when STAR tests were provided last year. So maybe example, a fourth grader moves in, they weren't enrolled in the state of Texas last year. Are they required to receive accelerated instruction?
No, students who did not participate in a STAR administration last year are not required to receive accelerated instruction.
So if they were in a private school in the state of Texas that didn't administer STAR or were out of state, they're not required to receive accelerated instruction.
Correct.
Right. Again, will there be products available for science and social study? For ratio waiver lists specifically, it depends on what is submitted and ultimately what may or may not qualify. We do have this pertains to another question. I know there's some products on the ratio waiver list that may have multiple subjects. And a lot of the questions I'm seeing are in our FAQ, and I'll drop that link again in the chat. Our FAQ has most of the questions I'm seeing answered. So if you're not familiar with that, that's a great resource to look at. Tons of resources linked there. But some of the products listed, I'm not going to name specifically in the ratio waiver list, may have other subjects, but those subject areas were not approved for a multitude of reasons. They may not have been submitted, or they may not meet the criteria to be approved for a ratio waiver list product. So only the subjects for those particular products are approved currently for the ratio waiver list. There may be those products may be submitted again and as part of the review for this fall, which is coming up shortly, and be reviewed and added for next school year. We don't know. We haven't seen that process hasn't kicked off yet. So there could potentially be other subject areas added other than what we have for math and reading. So just be aware of that. And the PEAM submission is scheduled for a summer submission. So that I know it many things may have been asked. It is scheduled for a summer submission. So ESCs, I know here in Austin, Region 13 recently had their PEAMS training, and I've talked to several LEAs that are setting up their systems for that process. And I know they're rolling out some newish collection processes for LEAs. Your ESCs can be a great source of that in getting things set up and information. And you can also reach out through our help desk if you have a specific question on that as well.
I'd like to add, Kobe, that some of these products have other products that are similar. For example, HMH Read 180 Flex has HMH Read 180. And so just know that the product that's on the list is HMH Read 180 Flex. And so it has to match what is on the chart.
There's other questions about other products that may be used for like math supplemental curriculum, or if you're under T-Class Decision 6, if those products are approved for high impact tutoring. Again, there's not a list of products that we say these are available for high impact tutoring in general. There are statutory things that we look for. Is a product designed for supplemental instruction? Are the TEKS covered that the student needs covered in preparation for the next test? And are the tutors that are administering or facilitating the tutoring sessions, have they been trained on the supplemental product? Is there anything else I'm missing, Alicia? I know that's probably the number one question we're getting is what products can we use? Can we not use? Do you recommend a product? But in general, some of the products we're providing through like math supplemental curriculum or have provided, those can be used in a high impact tutoring or just in general to comply with 1416 requirements as well. But that's not an exclusive list. You may have other products or even supplemental products that you're using as part of your core instruction already in your districts that could be used to meet those requirements as well. Is that anywhere in writing? I'm not sure what that was. I'm sorry, I missed it. But you can send us questions through the help desk. We'll be happy to answer those. I think that's 2:56. We have a couple minutes. Let me see if there's anything. Here's another about the consecutive failure. If a student fails sixth grade Math Star and they were absent for the second grade or seventh grade Math Star, does that count as a 2-year consecutive failure? So therefore they would need 30 hours, correct?
Correct. And they would need an AP
That's
that
right.
includes the 30 hours of accelerated instruction.
And if you go to our FAQ, there's some great charts that we developed, or I didn't develop them, but there's some great charts that talk about the different EOC scenarios as well. I know there's a lot of EOC scenarios presented. Some are very specific. So if we don't get to your specific question today, I would say go to the FAQ and see if you can find the answer there. But if not, we'll be happy to look at your specific question through a help desk ticket and get back to those. We're usually pretty quick about getting back to you on those or reaching out to us.
I'm going to share my screen again real quick just to show in case this is what we do every year. So in our FAQ, if you scroll down to the STAR reporting, here we have our accountability rating system, and you'll look at explanatory materials and resources. So you go to that section right here. And then here you have the 2024 STAR raw and scale scores. And then you have the accelerated instruction raw score and scale scores for science and social studies. So here you will find the table for science and social studies. And here you will find the table for reading and math. So I just wanted to show that since I saw that question coming up a few times.
Yeah, I marked that off there.
And again, I'll share the link in the chat. Stop.
I see a lot of art committee questions. Those are also delineated in the FAQ. Specifically, they're very similar. Another question, accelerated instruction, MTSS, RTI when it comes to PEIMS reporting. We tend to get a lot of questions about different interventions and things like that. And it's been primarily, the most recent one is students that are pulled for dyslexia services. Can dyslexia services count toward their House Bill 1416 requirements? And generally the answer has been no. The reason being is the accelerated instruction needs to be TEKS specific, and most of your dyslexia programs aren't aligned with specific TEKS that student needs for success on the next STAR exam. And I've not seen a program that meets those criteria. There may be an exception, so definitely something that could be presented in a question or scenario we would have to look at, but I've not had that presented in a way that said, yes, this could meet House Bill 1416 requirements because it is TEKS aligned. Here's how it is TEKS aligned. The programs I'm familiar with did not offer that cross alignment to meet the needs. Plus, also remember, students sometimes are pulled out of core instruction to fulfill those requirements. That is also not statutory aligned. We don't want to have students missing any of their tier 1 instruction to receive the accelerated instruction. That should be in addition to, i.e. supplemental. So just be sure that, we're not creating additional gaps in that student's instruction. So in elementary, sometimes it's a what I need time. The scheduling examples Alicia referenced give some ideas of how you can have either a common enrichment time or common tutoring time so students aren't missing out of that core instruction. Secondary can be a little more challenging, and we always welcome if you have a great secondary schedule and you figured it out. We'd love to see what you have planned. Some have booked a longer lunch period, and depending on where students are, they would have their accelerated instruction like the first half of the lunch block. Other students may have a longer lunch or have an enrichment period during that time. So lots of different ideas and strategies to problem solve. So Alicia, it's 3 o'clock. I think we can close it out. I appreciate everyone's attendance today. And Alicia, I'll let you close us out today.
Yes, again, thank you. I hope you found this helpful. Please do not hesitate to reach out to us. Send us your questions through the help desk, and this way we can provide you with guidance that's specific to your situation, to your question. We're always here to help. We're very responsive. Usually we provide a response within a day or two, unless it requires for us to do additional research. But again, our director, Dr. Self, has been great. He's been a great leader, and he's instilled in us the importance of providing a rapid response. So thank you again for joining us, and I hope you found this helpful. And don't forget to give us feedback. Thank you.